Well, let's get the thoughts now of Reform UK Deputy Leader Ben Habib. Good to see you this morning, Ben. And I'm sure you're very pleased with that new YouGov data out this morning that Reform could threaten 28 Tory seats.
Well, we intend to threaten them right across the country in every seat they hold. And, I mean, Harry's right. The way the Conservative Party will wish to spin this whole election is, who do you want to vote against? But if you want to change the country for the better, if you want to change in direction in the way the country is governed, you've got to decide who you wish to vote for, not who you wish to vote against. And actually, the only change on offer on the ticket is from Reform UK. If you look at Conservative Party policy, the way it's played out, their high taxation, big borrowing, big state intervention, high immigration, net zero, and Labour are that plus a bit more, all in the same direction. Whereas Reform UK stands 180 degrees against virtually every single thing I just said. So, if people want to change in the way the country's governed, they've got to vote for it. And that's the challenge we're going to have, is getting people out who would otherwise be disillusioned with politics, disillusioned with small c conservatism, because even though they want it, no party's prepared to offer it. We need to get them off their sofas into the polling booths on the 4th of July, voting for Reform UK.
Yeah, the problem you've got, though, in trying to... You've got people who are supporting you, right, who are frustrated, and that's understandable, but you've got to win people over. And the problem you've got is, apart from being a sort of protest party, if you like, people are going to say, well, what are Reform going to do about the NHS? What are Reform going to do about education? What are Reform going to do about social care? All these issues. What are Reform going to do about, maintaining our roads and our highways? And it's all these issues that until we see a manifesto, and unless you've actually laid all that out in fine detail, again, people aren't going to really know what they're voting for.
Well, actually, we have laid it out in fine detail. If you go to our website, we've got a contract with the people which sets all of this out. And it's all funded, by the way, by two very significant changes that we would make in government policy, both of which the Labour Party and Conservative Party are not prepared to make. The first is the ditching of net zero, which by the Treasury's own estimate is costing £50 billion per annum, roughly, and the removal of the free right of passage that commercial banks are being given as a result of getting interest on the money that was created for them when they sold their debt to the Bank of England, which is costing the country about 30 or 40 billion pounds a year. Just by ditching net zero and removing this free interest that the banks get, we would save 80 to 100 billion pounds per annum, which would give us the ability to roll out all our other policies, including those associated with the NHS, for which, by the way, we have some very novel ideas, again, none of which are being put forward by the opposition parties, by the main parties.
Look, I want to ask you about Nigel Farage. We've only got a minute left with you. He has decided not to stand as a candidate, but telling Tom Harwood on his show last night that he was actually planning to launch a campaign to become an MP next week, and that is why he says the Tories have decided to go early on this general election.
Well, I mean, that's Nigel's interpretation of it. The reality is that Rishi Sunak realised this was probably, even though this looks like a low point from most people's normal standpoint, this was probably a high point for Rishi Sunak. Inflation had come down, the economy wasn't shrinking. He can duck the question about whether flights for Rwanda are going to take off or not, because the election is coming before his own self-imposed 10 to 12 week time frame expires. And Reform UK was getting stronger every single day that he delayed the election. So I'm not sure how much Nigel Farage played in the Prime Minister's mind. I think there are a whole host of other reasons which moved him to call an election now. And I think from Rishi's perspective, it was probably a good move.
Are you saying then you don't believe Nigel? I mean, because the idea that he's got. Hold on a minute. The idea that he's got a general election campaign ready to roll next week, and he was planning to do it, and because of this announcement, he's shelved the whole thing. It's a bit unusual.
Well, I'm deputy leader of Reform UK, as you mentioned, and I was entirely unaware of his plans to launch a campaign next week.
OK. Well, I think that says all we need to know. I think, Ben Habib, good to see you this morning.
Thank you.